really appreciate that. I also appreciate KNAU's blurbing my talk, and Jessa Fisher and Tamara Wallace Ramirez and Helen Ranney and Abby Gritman and all the other people who helped to let the community know that we were going to have this presentation tonight. And I want to thank the folks at the Ecological Restoration Institute for their two wonderful books. The one that's a collection of essays about the ecology of the Ponderosa Forest, and the recent one, which is entitled The Field Guide to Forest and Mountain Plants of Northern Arizona, which is a wonderful new resource. And I'm having to go through and revise my flower almanac to get all the names and everything just right. Well, first I'd like to explain why Tom and I decided to do this project. Then we'll start off simply. This isn't exactly Ponderosa Forest for dummies, but it's not cutting-edge research either. I'm going to make a few generalizations about the architecture of the forest, about the soils, about the climates and the microclimates. And then we'll see some of the plants and animals of the forest throughout the seasons. Most mornings, Tom and I walk in the Ponderosa Forest near where we live. We live above Fay Canyon, which is a tributary of Walnut Canyon off Lake Mary Road. We're always learning more about this part of the forest, more to appreciate and marvel over. It's been logged at least twice. It's been thinned in places. It's been burned deliberately and accidentally. It's been grazed. But it continues to be a tranquil refuge for us, and it's a viable habitat for plants and animals as well. When we set off on our walks, we pass through what Tom has called the tree temple, the portal into the forest. It's a grand place of soaring rusty red trunks. It's where we often first hear birds calling. We begin to sense what the forest is like on that particular morning, Courtney, huh? Oh, I forgot to thank John Coombs for his bird sounds. Whether it's windy or cool or still and warm, with its fragrance of ponderosa bark. Neurologists say that scent and hearing affect the limbic system, also called the paleo-mammalian brain, which has been more poetically called the seat of emotion, the bridge to our memories, the clock that informs our circadian rhythms. When we enter the forest, we feel we can understand what John Muir meant by the clearest way into the universe is through a forest wilderness. We feel so grateful to live surrounded by this wonderful forest, and we like to make the most of being here by paying close attention and keeping notes on what we see. This is a page from this almanac of wildflowers I keep. I take pictures and record details of the flowers that are in bloom that we see when we take our walks. I've learned that besides their appeal and usefulness to us humans, each of these flowers has a story of its own. This is for a project I call the flower clock, what wild plants tell us about time. There are well over 100 species of flowering plants, not including shrubs and trees, within a half-hour walk from our front door. We keep track of their blooming dates and the kind of habitat they like, and have learned to look for them in the right place at the right time of year. Yet despite all our years of careful observations like these, an experience last year made us realize that our understanding of the forest has been a little haphazard. Last fall, we took a tour of the Gus Pearson Natural Area with forest scientist Doc Smith. In just a short time, Doc taught us half a dozen basics about things we'd seen but not really understood. That brief summary of fundamentals increased our appreciation of our surroundings right away. So we decided to develop a more unified view of the forest than just the random observations we'd made over the years. We began to record what's going on in the forest in words and images, to do some research and reading, to create a more complete picture of the forest for ourselves. Of course, like most people around here, we do know about the serious problems in the forest. The doghair thickets that outcompete old-growth trees, the bark beetles, the mistletoe, the risk of catastrophic fire. It goes on and on, we know that. The landscape is a very different one than it was a century ago. We know that. But those very real problems are not what tonight's talk is about. This evening I'd like to summon something else from the forest. The emergent properties of the forest that can appear when many entities, both alive and inanimate, combine together in an intricate yet coherent way. The grace to be found in the forest community, even today, is what Thomas Merton called the hidden wholeness that lies in the heart of all communities, even those with problems. At the preserve last year, Doc Smith first had us take a closer look at the natural architecture of the Ponderosa Forest. Ponderosas naturally grow in clumps of half a dozen trees or so, surrounded by grassy areas. We'd seen that, we hadn't thought about it. These clumps of trees form self-renewing microhabitats that occupy the same spots for generations. Clumps last so long in the same place that they modify the soil, binding up nitrogen in their tissues and fallen needles, which makes it less available to microorganisms in the soil or to other plants. The trees in a clump are not all of the same generation. They can be centuries apart in age, at different stages of development, but their interlocking canopies create a sheltered environment for nesting birds and squirrels. At each stage of the development, each tree has something to offer other members of the forest community, from the seeds of mature cones to insect larvae. So a clump of ponderosas serves as a much more complete habitat than an individual tree. Ebert squirrels are a well-known symbol of the Ponderosa Forest because of their mutually dependent relationship with the pines. Individual trees are important to them. They eat the soft inner bark at the end of the twigs and chew apart cones to eat the seeds and so on. But the arrangement of small groups of trees in clumps is critical to them too, because they nest and shelter in the upper branches of interlocking crowns. Even dead trees contribute to the forest community. Bats roost under loose bark, and a host of birds, including bluebirds, roost and nest in the cavities. Obviously, many birds depend on the ponderosas. Different birds who find their food the same way belong to what biologists call foraging guilds. They are foraging guilds of pickers and gleaners, hammerers and terrors, and probers and walkers, exploring the ponderosas for insects, seeds, and spiders. Some narrow their territory to branch tips or trunks. Others, like the nuthatches, explore mostly down the trees, while brown creepers explore up. This is my effort at showing you how many nuthatches there are on a tree at once. They're amazingly social birds. They're one of my very favorites. They are pickers and gleaners. They move in flocks, exploring the branch tips and bark for insects and spiders in summer and adding seeds to their diet in winter. They tend to move down a tree head first, keeping in touch with each other with these little cheeps. They nest in tree cavities, where often one of their earlier offspring will help the parents tend the nest, and the survival rate is greater for those nests that have a helper like that. In winter, over 100 pygmy nuthatches may roost together in a single tree cavity, keeping each other warm. They do this to save energy, and they're actually able to lower the body temperature because they're together like that. The Ponderosa Forest supports aerial predators too, from flycatchers to hawks that perch in the trees and swoop out after prey. Cooper's hawks are very agile. They pursue small birds through the trees and understory. Tom caught this one after he caught a bird. There's an intermediate level of vegetation in the forest, of juniper trees and shrubs. Junipers need a fair amount of sun and seem to do better where the canopy is more open. We find both Rocky Mountain and alligator junipers in the area where we walk. You can tell this is a Rocky by the droopy tips on its branches. They always look like they need more rain, even in the middle of a rainstorm. There are many different shrubs in this mid-level of the understory: currants, gooseberries, snowberries, and three-leaf sumac like this. We see them mostly on slopes and in draws and